Well, Marc Morano was the senior advisor to the big committee researching whether climate change was man-made or not. He runs the preeminent site researching the global crime bosses that want to be able to decide what type of toilet you have, light bulb, federal home inspections. Obama has announced, outside of law as our supreme ruler, just like with the carbon taxes and regulations on power plants that aren't part of General Electric's insider operation, that fire trucks, concrete mixers, semis, heavy-duty pickups, and all trucks in between will, for the first time, have to trim fuel consumption. Well, they already do that with all the catalytic converters. And emissions, they've been cutting emissions for 2 decades of heat-trapping gases. So that evil carbon dioxide, under new efficiency standards announced Tuesday by President Obama. The White House said the standards will save businesses billions of dollars in fuel costs. Oh, yeah. Yeah, right. Help reduce oil consumption and cut air pollution. The standards also apply to vehicle models after 2014, or 3 years away. This is just devastating. And it's carbon rules. But the good news is, despite all their fear-mongering and Obama saying, or his mouthpiece Al Gore saying polar bears can't swim, we've had some huge victories. And we have Marc Morano here to break that down for us. Some big victories have taken place in the last 2 weeks. The Hadron Collider found and backed previous science that it's space ions that are forming most of the heat-trapping clouds. NASA's had to admit that more heat goes out of the atmosphere than they thought. Others, like NASA, have had to admit that carbon dioxide follows heat increases, not the other way around. 3 years ago, it was found in UK courts that Al Gore had flipped the graph and had carbon dioxide before the heat increases. So a lot of things are coming out right now, but the best news that Marc Morano covered at climatedepot.com, and today I noticed it's in the Hill newspaper and other mainline publications confirming it, was that he began a expletive-laced tirade that we cannot repeat here, and all but admitted that their system is falling apart and that they are not going to be able to get their overt carbon taxes on people. So they've invested billions in getting the public to have to pay them a indulgence for the sin of breathing, because we put off carbon dioxide just like cars do, that plants then respirate from and live from. And so their system is being routed, according to the view and research of Marc Morano and others. So, Mark, please give us a breakdown of the devastating victories against the carbon mafia that the globe is having.
Well, thank you for having me on, Alex. The first victory is science and data. And this is so compelling. From A to Z, the entire case for man-made global warming is collapsing. You can start with Antarctica, the Arctic. Antarctica is at or near record sea ice extent. The Arctic, so many new studies have come out on the Arctic that, are you ready for this? Drum roll, please. Andrew Revkin, the mainstream lefty environmental reporter for the New York Times, announced yesterday that he no longer believes the Arctic will face a death spiral, and he actually says, quote, "I'm not worried about the resilience of the Arctic and not worried about a tipping point." And he rejects the idea of a death spiral. This is a mainstream reporter bailing out on probably the single greatest talking point that the global warmers have had, these frightening and scary loss of the Arctic. Never mind that the low point of Arctic ice 2007 was due to high-pressure days, unusual winds, ocean currents, and not man-made CO2. Never mind that we started monitoring the ice in 1979 at the end of the global cooling scare. So we picked a period where it had the most ice, and then we've had a few, 2 decades of warming followed by either cooling or no warming. The high point in temperatures is still 1998. So from the A to Z, polar bears at or near a historic population high. The indigenous people in Canada say they're absolutely thriving. Even the polar bear that killed this kid recently was actually, they were talking about how much ice there was in the area. So you look at sea level. Al Gore showed you maps of Florida half underwater. Sea level now, not only is it not accelerating, some monitors are showing sea level decelerating. Actually dropping since 2004. Mount Kilimanjaro, Gore made it a huge feature in his film, now gaining ice and snow. On every single issue that they have promoted, they have not only egg on their face, but they are being, it is revealing the utter collapse for their case.
And before you continue, let me just back up what you're saying. This is 4 days ago. Arctic tipping point may not be reached. BBC, who carry the holy grail of brainwashing and guilting and propaganda, they say right here, writing in the Journal of Science, the team found evidence that ice levels were 50% lower in the Arctic 5,000 years ago. Well, we've known that for decades from the ice core. But they do this scam every year where they show school kids and the general public on the news a satellite shot from the North Pole from space in the summer, time-lapse, showing upwards of a half of the Arctic disappearing. It always does that in the summer. And then Al Gore says there'll be no ice in 1 year, and he says it every year. And so, again, the route is completely... They knew this decades ago. Why is the BBC and New York Times now admitting that polar bears can swim? Their numbers are up fivefold in 50 years, that the Arctic used to be smaller. Why is there a complete route happening?
The same reason, and I studied this issue in the 90s. Remember the old deforestation, the Amazon rainforest, the Amazon's about to disappear. It'll be gone by the year 2000. This was in Disney films and National Geographic and kids shows. They had children terrified the last tree was going to be cut. Turns out, in 2009, the New York Times belatedly admitted that for every acre of rainforest cut, 50 may be regenerating. It was not such an urgent cause. After all, they quoted a scientist saying, they're calling it the galloping jungle. Old eco-scares don't just collapse overnight. They have to die a slow death. And what we're seeing, what you quoted from the BBC, what we're hearing from Andrew Rebka in the New York Times, this is actually an accelerated death, but it doesn't collapse overnight. There's way too much money for man-made global warming to collapse because the tens of billions of dollars just being poured into this climate con aren't going to go away. Scientists have made careers out of it. Foundations, universities, United Nations, the media is invested, our government's invested in it. You have... I will say this delicately. People like John-Holdren, who need remedial science education, he actually predicted that if man-made CO2 continued, we'd have ice-free winters in the Arctic. And there's no science to back it up. And this is the guy held up as a science czar, a man who stood toe-to-toe with Paul Ehrlich in the 70s, warning of...
Pachauri said thereed be no ice in the Himalayas with no proof.
Here's the greatest thing when you talk about John-Holdren. John Lennon, the ex-Beatle, made a scientific chump out of people like Paul Ehrlich and John-Holdren. In 1979, he debated Dick Cavett on TV and mocked and ridiculed the overpopulation scare. And now we know the new population scare is underpopulation. And even some of the same people who warned of overpopulation are retracting themselves as global population is stabilizing. So it's just every scare they come up with fades. Well, what's most shocking now about global warming, Alex, we have two recent scientists in Australia have now openly dissented. One of them, Professor Salby, is going to have a peer-reviewed study showing that CO2 follows the temperature rise. It's actually going to make it in the peer-reviewed journal. Skeptical scientists have been saying this for years. And Salby goes further. He's actually claiming that the recent rise in CO2 isn't even human-caused. It's all natural, that humans don't even have that power to rise CO2 from our human activity. In one scientist, another one, Judith Curry, who used to be a warmist, is now converted to an almost 100% skeptic. She says the new study could revolutionize man-made global warming. But you don't even need that study. Again, A to Z, look at any claim Al Gore made. Al Gore is now reduced to looking at blizzards, record cold, floods, droughts as proof of his theory. There's no way to falsify the theory. Al Gore and the man-made global warming movement have morphed into the predictions of Nostradamus, the Mayan calendar. It is not science anymore.
And there's always going to be extreme weather. And every time there is, yes, he says, pay me money and I'll fix everything. Now, the problem is, and I want you to get into his tirade at the Aspen Institute that you first broke from your sources, now confirmed, just blubbering anger by the collectivists that want to be able to run our lives. Talk about that, but then the problem is they don't care. They're going ahead outside of congressional law and implementing all this garbage. California is.
Let me start with, your second point. Our washing machines have been decimated by Energy Star EPA regulations based in climate fears. And here's what I mean.
No, I bought new ones a few years ago. They broke and wouldn't work. Bought more new ones. They broke and didn't work. Yeah, and now I'm trying to find an old junky one.
In 1996, 1997, Consumer Reports gave a pass to 100% of the washing machines in terms of the water flow, the energy, the cleaning. They all passed. Fast forward to recent years, and now we're finding even high-end washing machines are failing the test. Why? Because our government has sapped washing machines of power and energy. They no longer can clean clothes. They're going after our refrigerator next. They're actually going to go after ice makers. They've gone after our shower heads, our faucets, our toilets. They're going, and here's the headline of the day, Alex. The American SUV is regulatorily dead as we speak. Obama's new regulations of 50-mile-an-hour plus per gallon rules by 2025 completely lay waste to the SUV. They're going to cram electric cars down our throat, which the president of Audi correctly stated. You'd have to be an idiot. Only idiots buy these cars.
What, they've only sold like 1,000 volts or something? No one wants their crud.
People will be dying in Minnesota and other places in the winter as their cars run out of juice and they can't refuel them and they're stuck on the side of the road under 10-foot snowdrifts. It's a life and death issue. You have the head of GM calling for gas tax increase so they can sell their cars that no one wants to buy. So they've already succeeded in many ways. And then, of course, we have the EPA regulations lying in wait that's going to regulate what we exhale from our mouth, CO2. We inhale oxygen, exhale CO2. We have those lying in wait. Obama has wisely decided to wait until after the next presidential election, but we are facing very serious threats, and that is going to be the regulatory nightmare of the world. We're already talking governments around the world. The Japanese government is telling their people they had to go to bed an hour early to fight global warming. The head of the UN climate panel, Rajendra Pachauri, has said Americans can no longer have ice water in restaurants, that's too expensive.
But meanwhile, all these guys live in incredible palaces. Yes. Nat Rothschild, over there running the climate exchange, has giant yachts, jets, private islands, lavish parties. Prince Charles calling to cut everybody's... telling old ladies not to take hot baths. I mean, these people are so incredibly disgusting. But speaking of that, speaking of John Lennon on national TV talking about overpopulation being a fraud, here is that clip from the TV show you mentioned, Marc Morano. Here it is.